content that's now obviously pervading LinkedIn. So I think we should get going, Laura. And we're absolutely delighted that Laura was able to do this for us today. We're very, very grateful for her giving her time and her knowledge. And I think Laura is probably going to start off by telling what is a really fascinating story about how she came to set up her own business. She joined LinkedIn pre-IPO, and after 7 years decided to, as she put it, take a mad, crazy decision and go and live on a beach in Thailand. So I'm sure Laura will fill in the gaps, but a fascinating story, and just to prove that no matter what the situation and what environment you might be in, you can always do something phenomenal and entrepreneurial. So Laura, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, we were just talking before. I think Debbie, who's here on the call, introduced me to the amazing folks at Plan B. And I didn't know, but you told them about my wild and crazy moment when we went to Thailand. So that story goes that I joined LinkedIn in 2011 after sort of 10 years in marketing and ad agencies, and just basically got to live my dream of working, at the site where I was so crazy passionate about what they were doing. It was the only interesting development, in my opinion, that was happening in the recruitment space. And I was there for 7 years. I did lots of different jobs. We went through this explosive growth. But then after 7 years and 2 kids, my kids were 3 and 1 at the time, I just thought, I've got 2 years until my son started primary school. Why don't we go and do something wild and crazy before we're stuck in the kind of formal education system for the next 18 years? And so we literally made a very quick decision. I decided not to go back to LinkedIn after my mat leave. We rented our house out, and within a month we were on a plane to Thailand. And I didn't really know what I was going to do after leaving LinkedIn, but I have a pretty good network. I rely on LinkedIn extremely heavily for that, to keep in touch with people. And after about 6 months of me kind of choosing not to do anything, the requests for help started coming in. People from my network were saying, can you help me on a personal level with my LinkedIn profile? I had referrals come in through my network for businesses that needed help with strategy or marketing or employer branding. And literally overnight, a business was born. And ever since I got back to London, that's just gone from strength to strength. And that's how I am where I am right now. So I think I do a lot of different things in my independent kind of consulting role today. Yes, I help companies big and small with marketing and strategy and PR and thought leadership, but actually my heart lays in helping people use the platform for job seeking. That's my background. I spent 10 years working in ad agencies that specialized in recruitment comms. LinkedIn, as Holly and Emma both said, is extremely helpful. And what I really love, what we used to do at LinkedIn, is helping people find their dream job. So I'm very lucky that I get to talk about LinkedIn every day. And this kind of intro segues into my kind of opening about what we're going to talk about. And I'll share my screen real quick, because LinkedIn, if I put this on big screen mode there, LinkedIn is an incredibly helpful, that's me, by the way, you can find me on LinkedIn, is an incredibly helpful platform in business. And when I say in business, I mean hiring, marketing, sales. But from a job seeking perspective, there really is nothing like it. It was very, very transformational in the recruitment space. Kind of the big changes before LinkedIn came along in terms of looking for a job were, job boards like Monster, and then LinkedIn came and threw the whole thing wide open. And I think what's so important, what's so interesting about that is it created this level playing field. And it wasn't just people that were actively job seeking that suddenly companies could find. It was everybody. They could talk to everybody. So we're going to talk about why LinkedIn is so critical in business, but in job seeking. And kind of the meat on the bone of today's session is really, how to create a professional brand. And that is through optimizing your profile. And I'll share with you in a minute later on my sort of philosophy about how to use LinkedIn. I think people very much overcomplicate it, and it really is very, very simple. And then the third part of this session will be around the power of content, because it's all very well to have a profile, but if you don't say anything, then people don't know you're there. And whilst LinkedIn is incredibly helpful from its jobs part, you know, where they have jobs posted and you can apply for jobs. I'm a big believer in networking your way into a role. And we were talking just before we started this webinar, and I think we're all having conversations all the time with people in our network about, you know, looking at new opportunities. And I think even though the world is in a big mess at the moment, there is opportunity in that. And I think that having a voice on a platform like LinkedIn is a great way to create recognition of who you are, to remind people of who you are, to have a point of view that is known, and to position yourself as someone that's credible and knowledgeable and experienced. So the content piece is really, really important. So those are the three things we're going to cover off today. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. One of my biggest pitfalls is I get very excited about what LinkedIn has to offer, and there is so much that actually I could talk really, really fast and try and share with you loads of stuff. And the hardest part is trying to condense it, because we could actually spend the next 45 minutes just talking about, you know, a couple of parts of the profile and really digging deep into that. But what I'm going to try and do is kind of give you what I think are the most important things, but there is so much more. So ask lots of questions. Emma's going to keep an eye on the chat. So, you know, she'll interrupt me if they're really pertinent to what I'm talking about. But the plan is that we'll kind of stop sharing in about half an hour so you can ask those questions. So I'm going to whistle stop through this, because you guys are here because presumably you see the value in LinkedIn. But just as a reminder, and actually this is only 2 weeks old, this data, and already it's out of date, because this slide says, and I created this about 2 weeks ago for this Plan B session, had just over 700 million members, and as of a couple of days ago they're now at 722. So that just shows the scale of the growth, but also probably echoes what's happening in the world right now in terms of, you know, unemployment, etc. But not only do people have profiles, but companies have profiles. 50 million companies have profiles. And LinkedIn, since LinkedIn has always been a fantastic platform and has had a very viable business, but since Microsoft acquired them in 2016, it's kind of removed all the barriers, all the challenges, all the annoying things that used to be on the platform. And believe me, as someone that worked at LinkedIn, I heard about those all the time. Oh, it's so annoying when it does this, and we get so many messages, and oh, I wish it wouldn't post it when I do that. You know, a lot of that stuff has gone away because LinkedIn's had access to so much more engineering power. They're going through their first big change on the front end design right now. So you'll start to see things looking quite different in the coming weeks and months. But actually what's interesting is the platform is growing in terms of revenue. Companies trust it. And actually one thing that's quite interesting, and it relates to a point I was mentioning before about content, is that just in the last year, there's been a 50% increase in year-on-year growth in content shared. And I remember working at the platform in 2011, 2012, and going to client meetings and saying, LinkedIn is going to become the largest publisher of professional news in the world. Well, they are. So, it's a place for not just news, but views. And now it really is a destination for people to come if they want to find out about what's going on in their industry, in their network. And, before Microsoft, we never used to do any advertising, any promotion of ourselves whatsoever. But that's now changed. They're sponsoring football teams. They've got a #1 podcast, Hello Monday. Check it out. It's awesome. They, before lockdown, they were doing train station takeovers. They're very much in the kind of day-to-day right now. So if you're not embracing it, then I think it is a real missed opportunity. And I'm a big advocate of using LinkedIn for free. Now, I don't think that it's essential, depending on what your use case is, in paying for premium. There is so much you can do on the platform for free. So absolutely, this is a great time. And from a business point of view, LinkedIn has retained its #1 spot in a poll that Business Insider, trade press, business press does every year, in the #1 most trusted social media platform. And I think that's interesting because, 3-4 years ago, I used to have a lot of conversations with clients like, should we be using Facebook? Should we be using Instagram? But LinkedIn has never been kind of embroiled with challenges around security, or, there's been bits and pieces, but, big election scandals, none of that. Companies trust it. And I think right now, I'm very grateful that my business has really been very strong over the last 6 months, because I think companies are realizing that because they can't get out there to actually press the flesh and meet people and meet their customers and meet prospects and interview people in person, they have no choice but to do that digitally. And to do that through a platform like LinkedIn is a very natural kind of step for them. So companies that might have dabbled a little bit are now investing a lot more time in learning how to use LinkedIn properly. And so I think more than ever, it's a good time to embrace it. So to be honest, that's all I want to say about LinkedIn. This is my 1 minute philosophy on how I think about using it. So as I said, people, I think, massively overcomplicate it. But being on LinkedIn, it kind of, to me, there's 3 parts to the story. The first thing, LinkedIn is, at the end of the day, the largest professional network in the world. It is a network of people. It is a network of profiles. 700 million people, 29 million in the UK. People have profiles. And at the end of the day, it is a social network, but within a purely professional context. And people come onto it with a professional mindset. But the profile sits at the heart of everything on LinkedIn, because people do business with people. And no matter what you do on LinkedIn, all roads lead to Rome. All roads go back to your profile. If you like someone's article, if you connect with someone, if you apply for a job, the first thing that people do is look at your profile. So your profile has to be the start. And that's why we're going to spend the largest chunk of today's session. And it's always the largest chunk of most of the sessions that I do is around the profile. Because if you haven't got the profile right, there is no point in making all these great efforts to network and share content or like content or all these other things if your profile lets you down. Because people have very short attention spans on LinkedIn. And if your profile does not tell your story and represent your professional shop window, then you've lost them. You've lost people's engagement. So the profile is the start. The profile is everything. The second part of the story is around network. So you've got a great profile. You're going to do some of the things that hopefully I might suggest today. But then what? Then you've got to have a great network. And that's not about, it's not a numbers game. It's not quantity over quality, quite the opposite. It's about being connected to people where you can help them and they can help you. And actually, we're not going to talk about that in any great detail today, because I think, to be honest, the message here is, and I could do a whole section on this, but the message here is just be thoughtful about who you connect with. Make sure that everybody that you're connected to in real life, you're connected to on the platform. And often you might find that you're not. And so make sure that you're connecting and make those connections those connection requests personal. Don't just send out, I get so many blank connection requests a day. And it's, for me, that's akin to walking into a networking event, going up to someone, shaking their hand and walking off without saying anything at all. Like, who are you? What do you want from me? How can I help you? So to be honest, first part of the story is profile. Second part is grow a valuable and useful network. And then the third part is content. So you've got a great profile, you're connected to people, but if you never say anything at all and you don't raise your head above the parapet, then nobody knows that you're there. And for me, some people become quite overwhelmed with content because they don't know what to say. They don't know how much to say. They don't know what to talk about. So we'll look at that. But for me, this is, to be honest, I'd say in a normal world, LinkedIn is a 5-minute a day job for most people. If you're job seeking, then perhaps it's a little bit more, but it's not something, people don't come on the platform to dwell and spend lots of time. They come on to do very specific actions and then leave. So that's kind of it wasn't a minute, but that's my philosophy and how we think about about LinkedIn and how you use it. Just nail the profile. If you do nothing else, get that right. And then make sure you're connected to people that you know. The power of LinkedIn is in the second and third degree connections. It's not necessarily about who you're directly connected with. It's about who they know. And then it's content. So take a pause. Let's move in to talk about profile. So again, I'm not going to spend ages talking about this, but I just have to give a nod to the very boring privacy and settings. And the reason I just want to mention this is because I have worked with hundreds, if not thousands of people from a job seeking perspective, or purely from a personal brand perspective, whether you're a business owner or a leader in a business, whatever the reason you're using LinkedIn for. Actually, if your profile is set up in such a way that no one can see your picture, or that only people can connect with you if they know your email address, all of those things are actually really detrimental to the experience that you have on LinkedIn. So just spend 5 minutes going into the privacy and settings and just make your profile as open as you are comfortable being. It's fairly intuitive when you click on all the options. So when you go into privacy and settings, there's a whole menu of things that you can look at, like your security and your communications, how many emails you want to receive, etc. But the one that I'm interested in is visibility. And so this is the one that you want to go through, because the worst thing is if no one can see your picture, because later I'll show you that you get 12 times more views if people see your picture. And if you're a recruiter and you're scanning through profiles and people don't have pictures, then we know from the data that you are less likely to view their profile. So things like that. So just spend 5 minutes going through the very boring privacy and settings and just make sure that you are as open as possible. So I don't know why I picked Janine. Janine was a colleague of mine at LinkedIn, but she just has a fabulous profile. So I've used Janine's profile just to demonstrate this, but there are 12 different areas of the profile which kind of makes your profile complete. They are all important and all absolutely valid, but we can't cover them all off today. If you wanted a deeper dive, you can contact me, etc. But what we're going to do is just concentrate on a few. But Janine has a really great profile. It stands out. It tells a story. I think the main thing to remember is that a profile is so much more than a CV. You can bring to life your personality and your value add in your profile that you can't do on paper. And you can do that through telling your story in the summary. You can do that through you can see that on the bottom here, this featured section. You can do that through adding rich media to your profile and pointing. The web is not a two-dimensional text-based experience. When you think about how you browse the web in general, whether you're shopping or reading the news, and many people fall into the trap on LinkedIn of just having a very bland experience. And there's so much more that you can do to create standout between you and another person. And having worked with recruiters, and Holly, you are a pro at this much more than I am, but having worked with recruiters for many, many years, I don't think the challenge is necessarily in finding the skill to do a job, because I think there's a lot of people that many people can do what I do, but it's about fit. It's about understanding a business, finding a synergy between what you offer, what you do, the value that you bring, experiences that you've had in the past that you can bring to the next organization. It's all of that, other than the job description. Oh yes, I've got the skills. I've done this kind of typically role and responsibility in another company. It's more, and that's what LinkedIn can do. So what we're going to do is just focus. I'm sorry, I've picked on a couple of you here. Sorry, Holly, but I love your picture. I'm going to just pick on a couple of areas of the profile to concentrate on. I know it might sound silly, but actually just having photos on your picture, having pictures on your profile, makes a huge difference, especially if you're looking at multiple profiles, if you're scanning through as a recruiter. So just having that background image. So if we look here on Holly's profile, she's got this big banner image behind her picture. So many people don't go in and change that, and they end up with just a standard LinkedIn default blue one, which actually doesn't say anything at all. And in fact, it says that you haven't really got a grasp of how LinkedIn works, which sort of says something subconsciously. So you can go in and just change that picture. If you're not working for a company, it doesn't need to be company branded. For me, I have a slogan, which some people might think is cheesy, but it's something that I live by and I have lived by. And so I have a picture of that on my profile. It could be a beautiful landscape. It could be a place that you really love going. I think the main thing is that it should be big and bright and vibrant and, you know, create some sort of visual interest that maybe could be a topic of conversation later. Now, I worked with a company CEO who comes from the Middle East, and when I told him this, he uploaded a picture of a desert to his profile, which was bleak and beige and bland. And so I was like, okay, you've got the idea, but let's try and lift it a little bit more. So it could be any of those sorts of things. And your profile picture should be a close cropped head and shoulders shot. It doesn't need to be something that's been taken in a professional studio. It just needs to show your face, because the profile picture is so tiny. The icon is so tiny on many parts of the LinkedIn platform that people just need to see your face. So it just needs to be really tightly cropped. And actually, believe it or not, there's data at LinkedIn to say that an open mouth smile gets more engagement than a closed mouth smile. I know, bonkers, but it's true. So I think it just, I suppose, talks to you being open and warm and friendly. So, you know, Holly, your picture is absolutely perfect.
I paid extra for the airbrushing, Laura.
I don't believe it. The next point that I wanted to mention, and so I'm quite keen on like the most important aspects of the profile being the pictures, the headline, the summary. So those are the things we're going to talk about. I work with Karen. Debbie, who's on the call, will know Karen from the work we do with another organisation. And I just really love Karen's picture. I love Karen's background image. But also, if you look at her headline, the headline is the space underneath her name. And if you've never changed it, the standard default is just your most recent job title and your most recent company, which really doesn't really say anything about you. And this should be your personal brand tagline. So if you want people to remember you, what do you want them to remember? And also from an algorithm, I mean, LinkedIn is a platform like every website that's built on algorithms. It should pick up on keywords that are most pertinent to you and relevant to you in your role. So if I take Karen, for example, Karen has got 30 plus years experience as a business owner in the music industry, where they also make packaging for the music industry and other sectors. She also owns an eco lodge in Costa Rica, and she's a big champion of sustainable living. And all of that is wrapped up into her headline. So it's got keywords in there, but it also tells a story about Karen. I mean, Karen could have just said company owner at music production company, but really and truly that's quite bland and wouldn't talk to, you know, if you want to be recognized by recruitment software, then you need, you know, and we know these days that so much of the selection tools are AI based and bot based, that we need to be able to be using those keywords all the way peppered throughout our profile. So be creative about it, you know, do something that's going to create some standouts. So I really like this example that Karen has used on her profile here. I've actually used my own summary to demonstrate the next one. It's not me just going, oh, look at me, but I just find that it's an area that people often get wrong. So we've done headline, we've done picture, we've done headline. The next bit that's quite important, some people don't even have this, is the summary. Called the about. It used to be called summary, it's now called about. And this is the piece of, it's, people get a bit afraid of it sometimes because it's the first place on the profile where you've got kind of open sort of free text. But actually, I think it's quite straightforward. It needs to do so many things. It needs to be compelling. It needs to be client-centric. It needs to have lots of keywords. It needs to be specific. It needs to feel like you. You should talk in the first person. You know, it needs to do so many different things. But the way
quick question, Laura,
yes.
that's come in then. Would you detail in the headline or in your about if you're looking for a role?
I mean, I think right now the any stigma about people looking for roles has gone away completely. And LinkedIn has introduced this open to work image that you can put on your picture that I think put it out there in multiple places. So I think put it in the headline. I think put it in your summary. I think write a post about what you're looking for. I think it's all in the tone. You know, we don't want to scream desperation, but at the same time, we can be sensitive about how we word it. But I think we are all supporting each other in this. LinkedIn itself is actually going to be launching some new features which are rolling out at the moment. Like, for example, at the moment you can put open to work on your profile, but there's also going to be one available for people saying hiring, so that we can more easily connect people who are hiring with people who are open to work. So I think put it in the headline, but also put it in your summary and post about it. Actually, on that point, it's also worth mentioning, not everybody will read your whole profile from top to bottom. You know, everybody experiences the web in different ways. Our eyes are attracted to different things. Some people read from top to bottom. Some people go straight to the experience section. Let's not assume that everyone is going to take 3-4 minutes out of their day to read our entire profile. So absolutely don't be afraid of repeating things in multiple sections. I'm not saying repeat verbatim what you write in your headline, in the summary, etc., but use the same sorts of keywords multiple times in your profile, because somebody who might not read them in your summary, they might pick them up when you're talking about your experience. So absolutely repeat these things. And also it makes, you know, the algorithm will pick it up in multiple places as well. So I think the framework that I would think about writing your summary is quite simple. Think about it as your elevator pitch. You've got 30 seconds to tell somebody who you are and what you're all about. And how I would structure that would be 1 or 2 sentences on what you've done before, past, 1 or 2 sentences on what you're doing right now, present, and 1 or 2 sentences on trajectory, where you want to go, what you want to do. And if you include within that, you know, specific examples of work that you've done. So I see in my profile, I talk about, you know, I was in a sales org for a few years, you know, my targets, because it shows the kind of the scale of the work that I did. If you can include client names, so if you've worked with some bigger, more well-known brands, include those, because, you know, it gives it that kind of credibility, that people go, oh, well, if they've worked for them, they can definitely do this work for us. But it should be what you've done before, what you're doing right now, and kind of what your trajectory is if you're not in a current position, or where you would like to go, what you want to talk to people about, and use as many of the specific roles. So from a keyword perspective, if you know that there's a particular type of role that you're going after, you know, have a look at job descriptions and look at the types of wording that people are using, and make sure that you're incorporating those sorts of words. So for me, you know, I'm not actively looking for a job, but I'm always looking for clients. So I want, you know, employer branding, personal branding, B2B marketing, all these sorts of things to be in my profile. So if people are doing searches, that I'm going to be appearing in those searches. So that's how I would think about framing. It's all about value. It's not necessarily the nuts and bolts of you being able to do the job. It's demonstrating that you've done it before and that you can do it again. Okay, so jumping down to the experience section, it's kind of similar in a way to the summary, in that we want to be able to show what you've achieved and qualify and substantiate that. I'm a big fan of just writing lots of short sentences. So I look at profiles all the time, and, you know, I was reviewing 20 profiles today for a session that I'm running next week. And either one of the pitfalls that I see people fall in when it comes to this experience section is they basically use this space to sell the company. Well, you definitely don't need to do that. You can explain what the company does in 1 sentence, and that's enough. Or, so that's one thing, you're not selling yourself, you're selling somebody else, well, you don't need to do that. The other thing, the other pitfall that I see is it reads like a job description. So it might just be a list of roles and responsibilities, where actually that's just not interesting. I think you need to be selective, and you need to cherry pick the most important things that you've done. So you need to demonstrate to people. So maybe it's 3 examples. It's a bit like that classic question when you go to a job interview and they say, you know, tell us about a time when you've done X, and you actually need a real example when you've led a team or driven this initiative or whatever it is, because people need to be able to see themselves in you, and they need to see that you're a safe pair of hands. And so giving those specific examples, and again, without repeating verbatim what you've written in your summary, you know, mention clients that you've worked with. It's going to give social proof to others who are looking at it that you know what you're talking about. And also, just like you can see on my profile with those little 3 thumbnails, you can add rich media. And when I say rich media, what do I mean? You can add pictures, videos, documents to this section of your profile. Absolutely do that. You know, reading plain text can be pretty dull, but if people can click on a link and you can take them somewhere, you know, in my example here, I was involved in writing a playbook when I was at LinkedIn about employer brand. There are 2 other playbooks on here I was not involved with, but they're really interesting. So I've linked to them in my profile, and it kind of shows more my thinking, what I'm all about. One's about purpose, one's about leading in a digital age. So you can link people to other content to, you know, spark their interest a little bit and show them a little bit more about maybe work that you've done. And if it's not work you've done, you know, you can pinpoint people, you can point people to a website or something like that.
Laura, just to gently remind you on the timings.
Yep.
I was told to tell her.
That. Yeah, no, I asked Emma to do that. Thank you.
Laura, just a quick question on the content. Do you literally just cut and paste those links in if you want to add any rich?
Yeah, maybe what I can do in the Q&A, I was thinking about this, is I could go live into the site rather than just presenting, and I can show you things like, I can show you what the privacy and settings was, I can show you how you can actually go in and do that. So why don't we do that in about 10 minutes time? The last thing, actually, this is the last thing that I'm actually going to talk to. I was going to talk about recommendations, but I'm going to move through that. The last thing that actually is the biggest kind of unsung hero, and Debbie, when I work with your team in a couple of days' time, I'm going to talk about this a lot because there isn't anyone in your team who's using this. LinkedIn introduced this section on the profile about 4, 5, 6 months ago, maybe now, and it's called the featured section. And it is the best way to showcase content on your profile. So it's the best way to bring to life what you're all about. Because what you can do is you can pin right slap bang into the middle of your profile any recent posts that you've put out, any long form articles that you've written, which maybe you haven't. I've written 3 in my lifetime on LinkedIn. You can literally upload any content, whether it be a PDF, you put your CV there, your CV, a Word document, a PDF, a portfolio. You could link to a website, and it just creates this huge big banner right in the middle of your profile, which is so much more engaging than just reading text. And it goes to the point about showing your personality, and it's kind of, it's not a case of just, this is what I do, this is, you know, show not say. So this is an example here from Lena at Unilever, who's just another one of my clients who does this really, really well. I alternate the content in my featured section fairly regularly. So for example, I was speaking at an event last week, so I promoted that in my featured section. So if somebody came to my profile, they'd see it. I've written an article today about things that I learned since leaving LinkedIn. So I feature that on my profile. Writing an article is a great way to create some, you know, attention and PR. And I'll show you, what I'll do is I'll jump into the live site in a sec and I'll show you where this is. Actually, you know what? Let's do it now. Let's jump into the live site while it's top of mind. Let's just go into the live chat and I'll show you exactly where that is. I've got to find the option. Here we go. So this is just my LinkedIn homepage. So I'm just literally at linkedin.com right here. And in order to get to my profile, I just click on me right at the top here and I go to view my profile. That's, for me, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. I like doing it that way. And then this blue button on the profile here has got every single section of the profile. So one way that you can get to navigate to it is I can click on that little down arrow and featured comes up 3rd in the list. And it literally shows me these are the different things that I could add into that section. So like I mentioned, recent posts, articles, links, or media, which basically means kind of pictures. So if I was to click on media, you'll see my computer screen open here in a minute. It literally will open up a file on my computer and I can pick anything that I want to showcase in that section. Links, it could be a link to a website. I might link to Plan B site if you had one, you know, anything like that. And what it does is it creates this great big tile in the middle of the profile, which says so much more about me than just the words on my profile. And again, everyone consumes content in different ways on the web. You need to appeal to everybody's different kind of way of navigating. Not everybody wants to read stuff. Some people do. Some people want to click an article. Some people want to click a link. And you can reorganize all these things. So what I would do is just dump a couple of things in there, 2 or 3 things. And then you can just, if you anywhere where you see a pencil on LinkedIn, a blue pencil is where you can edit. And then what you could do is you could just drag and drop and move them around. So if you didn't like the order in which they appeared, you literally just drag and drop them around and they can appear in a way that you're happy with. And they just appear across here. And it's just so much more interesting. If I just make my page a little bit smaller, it just creates a much more visually interesting and engaging and creates that story that I was talking about. You really want to tell a story through your profile. I think when it comes to whether it be, you know, just to raise your profile or from a job seeking perspective, you want to remove any guesswork that people may have about you when they come to your profile. You want to control the opportunity to tell the story that you want them to tell about you. And so
Laura, quick question.
Yes.
From somebody. Does it re-notify your network in the newsfeed if you've added something, say from the past, to featured, or does it stay as a nice showcase in your profile?
So with the featured section, nobody is notified if you add, remove, change things. However, just to that point, if you go on to your profile and make changes, for example, in the experience section, if you haven't unchecked the box in the privacy and settings, then people will be notified. So that is a really good one to go in and make sure that it is checked the way you want it. Because if I go in and tweak something in my experience, I do not want a notification going out to my entire network that I've changed something. So what I'll do is quickly to go to privacy and settings, which I showed you at the top of this section. Again, I click on the me right here in the top navigation, and settings and privacy is in this menu. And it takes me through to here. And it automatically brought me into this data privacy section, which is not what I want to show you right now. I want to show you this visibility one. So this is the really important one when it comes to what we're kind of talking about here, about elevating your personal brand, because if people can't see you or they can't connect with you because of certain things that are ticked or unticked, then that's not, you know, not going to be helpful to you. So in this section, in this kind of second subsection, visibility of your LinkedIn activity, there's an option here that says share job changes, education changes, and work anniversaries from your profile. And that one should be ticked to no. Otherwise, whenever you change anything here, which you might want to go and tweak, and you might change it if you're applying for different roles, that should be no. Otherwise, every time people get a notification. So I would go through things like who can see your last name. If your name is Phil, you know, not Laura F, it's Laura Fox, we know from the data that people are more likely to connect with you. Who can see or download your email address? Well, only yesterday I had a completely solicited email come in from somebody who's a second degree connection. And I said, oh, how did you get in touch with me? And he said, oh, I just took your email address off your LinkedIn profile. But so many people that I work with have this set where only their first degree connections, for example, can access their email address. Where if you're using LinkedIn to be visible and proactive, that completely defeats the point. So that's why I'd say just go in and spend 10 minutes. This visibility one is the one I'm most interested in. But, you know, for your own sanity, you might want to have a look at some of the other ones as well. But that's the one to really just make sure that you're as open as you're comfortable being. I think let's jump into content real quick, because otherwise we really will be out of time. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen again here. Feel free to, Emma, jump in if there's any other questions, by the way.
Will do.
So just in terms of content, I think the golden rules are, you know, when it comes to content, give before you take. You know, people come onto LinkedIn. One of the main USPs that people come onto LinkedIn for is because they want to learn about things that happen in their industry. Right now, it's who's hiring. It might be what changes are happening. You know, how are businesses being affected by what's going on in the world? And so if you read something that you think is interesting or useful to people in your network, share it. Because I think if you can be somebody that gives and shares, then you're more likely to be somebody that receives. And again, that's something that Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn's founder, talked about a lot. And it was very much a driving force in how they created the platform. And LinkedIn is very much around breaking news, but I think what's more important is breaking views. So people want to know your opinion. People want to, yes, it's, you know, it's a real balance of personal versus professional. But people want to know what you think about something, especially if you're in a senior position. You know, if you're someone that's, you know, you've been working a long time and you're in a senior role, or you're moving into a senior role, then people would expect for you to have an opinion on things that are happening in your space. So don't be afraid to share that opinion. Curation versus creation. Don't feel like you have to write all your own content. I wrote an article today because I had this idea in my mind bubbling for a few days. It's the third article I've ever written on LinkedIn. So curation, sharing other people's stuff, just as valid as sharing your own. But if you do see somebody's written something, you know, do more than just like it. You know, pressing the like button, yes, it will create a tiny bit of interest, but it's a little bit lazy. So if you can just take that extra 30 seconds to write a comment, or, you know, why do other people share content? Because they want to be noticed, because they're doing it to create some engagement. So I always think, be a good LinkedIn citizen and just take that 30 seconds longer to share your opinion. If you like that piece, just take a moment to do more than just click the like button. Because I think the power in LinkedIn, and I kind of briefly mentioned this before, is not just in your first degree connection. Like, you kind of know the people that you know, even if you haven't seen them for a very long time. And absolutely, there is value in reconnecting with your first degree connections that you might not have spoken to for years and years and years. But I think the true power in LinkedIn lies in the second and the third degree connections, like the people that you know, that you don't know who other people are connected with.
So Laura, we've got a question about that. So
yeah.
Somebody said, you said that we should connect with anyone we know in real life. Someone's told them that connecting with people who won't interact with your posts will damage how the algorithm treats you. Are these contradictory?
So LinkedIn introduced a new quality score to content about a year ago, and nobody knows what it is, but it's based on lots of things. So it's based on a very complex, multi-layered data set, which would cover things like how long someone has hovered over your post in the feed, how long if somebody clicks on the more. So if you write, you know, beyond a sentence, you have to click more to see if somebody has watched the video, how much of the video have they watched? Have they watched 5 seconds or 50? So all of these different things are influencing whether or not LinkedIn considers your content to be quality, and therefore will it show it in other people's news feeds. I am not, just to be clear, recommending that you just connect with anybody. When I say connect with people that you know in the real life, what I mean is connect with people that you know in real life from your professional world. That's not to say that if you were to go pre-COVID times to a dinner party and you met somebody that worked in an industry that you think, actually, I could work in that industry, or they could be potentially a good person for, I could help them, they could help me, there could be mutual benefit of knowing each other, then absolutely connect with them. But what I'm not saying that connect with the teacher's assistant at your child's school just because you know them in real life. No, just to be clear, what I'm saying is connect with the people that you know from your professional life on LinkedIn, because it's amazing how many people don't. You might not think to connect with cross-functional partners that you've worked with in your business, or your marketing person that you've worked with in your previous organization. So connect with people that you know. I'm not talking about everybody that you've ever met in your life. I think people that you think will have mutual benefit. So therefore, when they see your content or you see theirs, it is going to be useful to you. You're going to learn something. They're going to learn something from you. So just to clarify on that point.
Okay, so following on from that then, a question from Olivia. What is your opinion on sharing posts from others? Historically, it's not been as good for the algorithm, but with the recent changes, assuming you share with a comment, is it worthwhile?
So very good question. And there's been a lot of talk in LinkedIn forums about this. And I've asked people, I've still got a lot of pals at LinkedIn. Organic posts, native posts still perform better than shares. So if you see that somebody has shared a piece of content and you think it's really good, actually, from an algorithm point of view, and I wish it wasn't this way, but right now what I'm seeing and what other people are seeing is it is better to almost copy and paste that content, share it as an original post, and then write your comment on it. And you can give a nod back to that person to say, oh, I saw this shared on somebody else's post. Kudos to them. I think it's really, really helpful. This is what I think. But actually, by hitting the share button, we are finding, and this is not official LinkedIn, because I think LinkedIn would hate us for us to be saying this, that actually they are performing better as native posts. So I occasionally share, and actually I still test it. I do, you know, as somebody that uses LinkedIn quite heavily, I do test it. And sometimes I find occasionally the share does outperform, but not usually. So yeah, I would always take the content that you see and copy and paste it. If it's an article, copy and paste the link and put it in your own post, because you probably will find, and I'm sure LinkedIn will address this at some point, because I don't think that's what they want, but that is what we're seeing is happening.
Okay, so very conscious we're into our last 10 minutes. So if anybody has any questions for Laura on specifics, then now is your time to put them on the Q&A, and then I can run through them with her, because I think we've answered all of the others, and we've answered those live. So if anybody has any other questions, or would you want to carry on for the time being?
So what I'll do is I'll just share with you my thoughts. So just a very quick note. This was some very recent data that I got given by a pal at LinkedIn about thought leadership. And just to assuage any kind of thoughts around this, this was quite interesting. I thought that it said that this was LinkedIn did a study with Edelman about thought leadership. And what it showed us is that almost half of decision makers spend 1 hour or more reading thought leadership per week. And because I'm here with Plan B, and I know that, you know, we're probably here with more experienced people. We're talking recent graduates necessarily on this call. I think the point is that decision makers are spending time reading thought leadership pieces. So whereas I'm not necessarily saying that you need to be all starting to think about, you know, huge articles that you need to be writing, actually the consumption of thought leadership has grown significantly. So what do you want to be known for? So while you don't need to necessarily stick to one of these, perhaps thinking about, you know, what do you want to write about, or what do you want to share content about, so it doesn't become a scattergun type approach. You might just want to think about, like, which of these are you? Are you somebody that wants to challenge the status quo? Are you somebody who wants to inspire others? Is your, you know, which of these is your purpose to educate and grow? Which of these are kind of a you? And that might just help kind of solidify in your own mind. So for me, you know, I'm somebody who wants to share and educate other people around the LinkedIn opportunity. So I focus most of my content, whether it be articles that I've read or, you know, pieces that I've written, which, you know, are less because I curate more than I create, is I've definitely thought about which one am I, which one do I want to be? And if I'm thinking about changing roles, like how do I want to be positioned to that new company? And actually maybe a starting point for some people on this call might be actually taking the plunge and writing your first kind of long form article, which LinkedIn, it makes it very, very easy to do. I did my third one today, and you know, it's very simple, and I'm terrified of writing, but actually I wrote my second only one at the beginning of the year, and it created, you know, huge kind of goodwill and good feeling amongst my network, and created a lot of, you know, free PR basically. So I think if you can find a topic that you think will resonate with people in your network, then absolutely do that.
Okay, a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
When is the best time of day to post on LinkedIn, and are some days better than others?
Yes, definitely. So the best days you want to post are Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays, because they are the days that have the highest traffic. And which kind of makes sense because Monday people are kind of kickstarting their week and they are not necessarily kind of thinking about LinkedIn as much. The traffic is still there, but it's not as high as Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And Friday, people are winding down. And from a time point of view, what we can see, and this hasn't changed at all in the last 6 months, is it tends to be 9 o'clock in the morning or lunchtime. So if you imagine, I guess, people get to, you know, sit down at their computer, and it doesn't tend to be the traditional 9 to 5 anymore, but still at the start of the day and kind of when they're taking a break, people are still in that professional mindset and they're kind of browsing on LinkedIn. And I didn't talk to this so specifically, but for me, I said LinkedIn's like a 5-minute a day job. So I want to go onto LinkedIn every day and do something, add a connection, read an article and then comment on it, share something, look at my notifications. And I do that while I'm waiting for a cup of tea to brew, you know, or whilst I'm just waiting for something to happen on my computer. Now I do a lot of stuff from my mobile. And I find, you know, you can't do everything on the mobile, I should say. There are restrictions. There are some things you can do on mobile that you can't do on the desktop. For example, they've got this really cool new feature where you can record your name, because one of the things in, you know, if you've got a complicated sounding name, it can be quite annoying that people can't pronounce your name. And so you can now record the way to say your name on the phone and attach it to your profile. You can't do that on the desktop. So it's 5 minutes a day, and maybe a little bit more if you're really proactively job seeking, in terms of, you know, maybe there's some interesting content, maybe there's some outreach that you can do to people. So yeah, that's kind of like where my head is in terms of, LinkedIn did a big campaign about this about 7 or 8 years ago, about spending 9 minutes a day on the platform. And I think that's definitely all you need to spend. And one of the other things,
last question.
Yeah, go for it.
What's your opinion on the SSI stats?
I mean, why do people want to know what the SSI stats are? So LinkedIn introduced the sales, I can't remember what it stands for now, sales indicator, which is basically a measure of how good you are on LinkedIn. And we developed it as part of the suite of tools that sold what we called our Sales Navigator product, which was the product that we developed in like 2013 to sell to salespeople. And when I'm doing sessions to sales teams, they love to look at it and go, oh, I've got a 75% SSI, and I've got, you know, which basically, and it shows you can go to, I think it's linkedin.com. I'm going to check this while I'm talking, SSI. It used to be anyway, and if it's not, I can put it in. No, it's not anymore. Social sales, I'm going to look it up, index. And, you know, people go, oh, this is my SSI, what's your SSI? And it kind of, if you're, you know, from a sales point of view, you're quite competitive, it can show you where you sit based on a number of different indicators, like, you know, is your brand good? Do you engage with insights? My SSI used to be, when I was at LinkedIn, in the 90th percentile range, because I used it so heavily for sales. Now I'm in the kind of late 70, early 80 percentile range, depending on what I'm doing. And it kind of gives you a number to say whether you're strong or not, or where you appear as a rank against similar people to you. So yeah, it's a bit of fun, but I don't think it's strictly important. And what I'll do is I'll put the link in the chat, and you can have a look if you want to see what your SSI is.
Thank you, Laura. We are out of time. A couple of people have just left because they had to go to a meeting, but they wanted to say thank you so much, that your top tips have been really, really helpful and given us an amazing insight into LinkedIn. So I know that there's lots of other kind of questions coming through. So what we will do is we will pick those up and answer those separately. But Laura, thank you. So Hol, do you want to finish off?
Yeah, just to say, Laura, that was really, really useful. I've made a load of notes. I'm sure everyone else has as well. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for joining, and thank you for your questions. If you do have other burning questions that you didn't get a chance to ask, please send them to me or Emma afterwards, and I'm sure that we can answer them offline for you. But this will
be on record.
Yeah, absolutely, and it will be on the website. So please keep spreading the word about Plan B. Keep your eyes peeled for future webinars and events, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. And stay well, everyone.
And Laura, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you, everyone.